Who's ready for a really interesting, inspiring day? Thank you, Christine. I'm Casey, and I've already been introduced. I did want to acknowledge one more person. We have Rory Bueller. He's our Master of Social Work intern from the University of Pittsburgh. He's been a big help fall, spring. Just wanted to mention that. And delighted to introduce our first presenter of the day, a world-renowned speech and language pathologist, John Dean. He has been specializing in Parkinson's since 2007. And in addition to his clinical work, he has launched networks of interdisciplinary Parkinson's rehab teams. And he founded award-winning startups, building technologies for people with Parkinson's. He is the chair of the Health Professionals Special Interest Group of the International Parkinson and Movement Disorder Society. He also co-chairs the Web Editorial Board. He is a member of the Scientific Advisory Board for the Davis Phinney Foundation. And he highlights interesting startups for Parkinson's around the world. So we're delighted to have John Dean here, and he's going to get started, and there may be some time for questions as well. And take it away, John.
Hello, it's great to be here. It's nonprofit doing such great work, and you guys are really firing on all cylinders. You had a great event yesterday. Okay, I can stay here. I had a lab, but I'd be happy to do what you'd like. And last night we had a really interesting program where we trained different health providers, advanced practice providers. It was fantastic. We had this session today. We're doing a program where we're training providers for boxing. It's really great to see the Parkinson's Foundation of Western Pennsylvania doing so much great, amazing stuff. And I'm really happy to be here again. This is their third time, I believe. I am a speech language pathologist, and I have been specializing in Parkinson's for about 20 years. Today, I will be talking a little bit about communication, but I want to take a different spin on that. I'm going to talk a little bit about how cognition influences communication. And when we say communication, it really covers a lot of ground. We're talking about the speech components, the things that we do to make sounds, and we shape those sounds with our lips and our teeth, whatever, and then we use that to form language. And that's how we communicate with one another. And it starts at the very beginning with the diaphragm. The diaphragm fires, it contracts, it opens up space, we fill our lungs with air, and at that point it goes through the vocal folds, and the vocal folds just vibrate, they just make sound, they don't really do anything with that sound until it gets shaped up in the throat, in the soft palate, and the lips, and the teeth, and the tongue, and this is how we produce the speech sounds. But when you look at Parkinson's, you get into a lot of factors that can really influence that. And what I like to say about this is that whatever you can see in Parkinson's, the movement-related components of it, happens in places where you can't see it, but you may be able to hear it because the first thing we notice is quiet voicing. Quiet voice associated with Parkinson's is one of the most common features I see as a speech-language pathologist. As a matter of fact, I'd say if you came into my clinic and you didn't deal with that issue, I'd start to wonder why. I'd want to know what to cause it. Maybe you were a professional voice user, you were a teacher or something like that, but otherwise it's so common that is a hallmark of the disease for me. And it's one of these things where it's really an analogy for the smaller steps and the smaller handwriting. It's very much like that. So you have a quieter voicing, you have a loss of facial expression. That's not any different than taking smaller steps or having a smaller signature when you're writing your checks. Now, this happens because of a mismatch of the perception of how much effort you're using. We call it a calibration issue. And calibration just simply means that I believe my brain is telling me that I'm using this much effort, and when in fact I'm really using this much effort, and that change has happened insidiously over time, year after year, so it's happened so slowly we really don't notice it. And so what I say for the cognitive side of this is that when you take LSVT, loud, or speak out, or another approach with a speech therapist, you'll find that it is using a fair amount of attention and cognitive load, and you have to remember to be loud, and you might even have to get yourself in a posture so you're more upright. And that does take some cognition, and that means that attention you can't use for other things. Now, when I was talking about, I don't know, was it down here or not? I might have gone too far. When I was talking about the changes associated with with Parkinson's and the lack of movement, that also plays into pitch and word stress. And we use word stress and pitch to convey certain things. Actually, Casey, I was very impressed with the way that you emphasize certain words. We talk about speech and language, pathologist. And if I was going to point something out to you and I wanted to make sure you understood it, I would slow down a little bit, and then I would stretch out that vowel sound, and in that way I knew, no, I meant the door over there. And if you have Parkinson's and you're not using that level of effort anymore because it's changed with the calibration, you're going to be throwing different cues out to people. And if I'm asking you a question, I'd say, hey, did you see that? But I didn't go up as high with that pitch. You're going to have less communication ability, and it's going to throw people off. It's the kind of nonverbal, well, not nonverbal, but non-language related components that we really don't think about, but it gets influenced by the Parkinson's. And then imprecise consonants, what'll happen if you have rigidity, like you have some muscle tightness here in one of your joints, that also happens with your tongue and with the vocal folds and with the other areas. And so maybe your tongue coming up to the back of your front teeth to make a T sound, it's not going to go as far, and you're going to miss the mark. And instead of putting a T sound there, you're going to put a little sh, and you're going to throw people off because it's not what they're expecting to hear. They're expecting you to use the perfect articulation, the tip and the tongue, and it's like those kind of things all come into play. And if you're going to be trying to address them, you're going to have to use attention. You're going to have to use some cognition to focus on that. Now, when it comes to the voice quality, this is very interesting because people often tell me they have a hoarse voice and it sounds a little gravelly, and obviously it's quieter, and that comes from a couple different factors. On the one hand, if you're not using your voice as much, you're not using your articulators as much, when you have to bring them to bear, if you're in a noisy environment where you have 300 people in a room and you're all talking, you have to talk over each other, now you have to recruit the muscles in a way that makes it harder to be understood, and maybe those muscles are a little bit out of shape, and so you're working harder and you're recruiting from places you didn't mean to. But what often happens with the voice is because Parkinson's happens so symmetrically, if one of the vocal folds isn't firing as fast as the other one, you get this asymmetry in the wave, or even you get a little opening of the vocal folds where there's a leak in there. And anytime there's a leak or there's air going in ways that it shouldn't be going, it's going to sound like static. It's going to sound like white noise. And that sh sound is going to interfere with how well you're understood, because instead of having a firm, clear voice that everyone can hear and we all sound authoritative, you're going to have a little more breathiness in there, and you're going to have it until it finally becomes quieter and quieter. So those are all the speech components that really get affected by the Parkinson's itself. Those are the ways those things intersect. But then you take all of that over to language production, where we're now really bringing to bear our background and our work environment and our home environment and our cultural environment, and we're bringing all that to bear. So it starts with motor planning. It starts with taking all those speech sounds and putting them together and making sounds out of them that sound intelligible wherever you are. I spend a lot of time over in Portugal, and the way that the speech sounds there are much different than they sound over here, and it's one of these things where it's very cultural. So you have the motor planning part of that. But then I'm in a conversation with you. Pretend I'm at a coffee shop and I'm talking with somebody and I'm listening to you and we're talking about something that's important, and then maybe I have something I want to say, but I got to keep it and wait and hold on because the other person is still talking. There's a lot of anxiety of wanting to get that word out. And then right in the middle of it, the server comes by and heats up the coffee, and all of a sudden now you've lost track of the conversation. So we use our memory a lot in order to be able to bring up the stuff in the conversation, to bring up the facts of a conversation. God forbid we talk about something that happened a couple years ago or a historical event. Those are all the memory components that are in play with just basic communication. And then you add to that attention. And attention is really where the memory starts, because I'm attending to you, I'm looking at you, we're having a conversation, and then someone walks behind you. Well, I got to stay focused on you. I can't get distracted by that, or someone's making noise over here, or someone's phone is ringing. And that selective attention, that focused attention, is where things start to really get a little shaky. Adding on top of that, we have what's called prosody and intonation, and that's just fancy terminology for the up and down sing-song of speech. The way that we emphasize, we were talking about before, the way that we change our pitches. So if I'm going to name 3 things, I'm going to say this is the first thing, and here's the second thing, and this is the third thing. And the way I said that, you know that I'm done on the third thing, and it gets influenced again by Parkinson's. All the pragmatics and the nonverbals are also important. And all we're saying with that is the way that we nod. I see some people nodding their head, or they're telling me that they're following along. That's very important. And then we do a lot of stuff with eye contact to say, hey, I want to talk. It's my turn. You know, I don't want to put my hand up like I did when I was in 3rd grade, but I will if I have to. And those things get influenced, and particularly if your posture gets changed, then a lot of the eye contact is modified. So when you're dealing with some of the forward-leaning posture in Parkinson's, that has a big influence on the communication. And finally, there's word finding, and word finding is very common. Does everyone here know what I mean when I say word finding issues? Yeah. Anyone not really? I mean, it should put that, there be fewer hands. I deal with this too. I think some of the word finding is really age related. I mean, we all get older, and what was I thinking of? It's on the tip of my tongue. What is that? I'm going to spend a minute or two on this because it's pretty common in Parkinson's. I wouldn't say it's so common in Parkinson's that if you don't have it, I worry about whether or not it's a real diagnosis, but I will say that this tip of the tongue syndrome is pretty common. A little bit has to do with the attention, a little bit has to do with verbal fluency. I'm not going to worry about that. But what you'll see is when you're having a conversation is that there are more pauses. There's more hesitation. Of course, trying to fit into a conversation where people are talking and going back and forth, that's its own kind of problem. That's also why there's more pauses. And then you'll have fewer words in a minute. DBS has a little bit of an influence on that, but really what I find people are dealing with is just how do I get around this problem? And I think it's pretty simple. I mean, it's pretty intuitive. I will say that I think directly drilling words that begin with the letter A or words that begin with another letter, that's not necessarily going to improve things. That's not the way we communicate. You've never been in an office environment like, Dean, you know, give me 20 words that begin with the letter L or you're fired. That's not how we do it, you know. So you just want to be able to navigate the conversation, you know, talk around the word. If you're trying to think of the word bus, then you know the thing we all get in, you bypass, it drives us all around, and someone's going to fill in. They're going to say, oh, you mean a bus? And that's my second bit of advice here is crowdsource. So if you can't come up with it, hopefully the people you're talking with are here to help you. They'll help you find it. Or your spouse, hopefully you guys have some cues and they're pretty subtle. You don't have to go Carol Burnett or anything like that, but they can do it. And I think that's valuable so that you can get around it. And then finally, if you can't remember what it is, put a placeholder in there because everyone who has this problem, does the word come back eventually? Yeah. Sometimes it's 3 minutes, sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 2 hours. It's never when I need it, but it's coming back. And so you can say, you know, it's not that important. We'll come back to it. My point is, and you're moving along singing a song, and that's what we want. Now, how does this play in to the daily activities we're doing? We're all walking around. I would say walking while you're talking, it's the original dual task. It's the thing we've been doing, dual task. That means that I have to do 2 things and keep them both going. Communication is a complex activity. Walking is a complex activity. Walking with a bunch of groceries, as this guy's doing here in the picture, that's a fairly complex activity. If there's noise, if there's an unstable surface, maybe it's a little bit rainy outside like it was yesterday, all these things influence that. And what's going to happen is either the walking is going to change or the talking is going to change. And as a matter of fact, the Dutch came up with basically a metric they were using, stops walking while talking. And basically they're testing people, they're working in a clinic, and they start a conversation, and they want to see whether or not you're going to slow down, maybe you're going to get a little slower, or are you going to stop so you can get your point out? And oftentimes what happens is your voice also gets quieter at the same time. I remember working with somebody many, many years ago, like 15 years ago, and he told me one of his first signs, he would go on a walk with his wife after work, and he noticed that they're having their conversation, they're talking about their day, and he said, every time we started getting into the conversation, I would get a little slower, and I would be behind her, and he's a much bigger guy and much more fit, and that shouldn't have happened, and that became the indication, and that's how this plays into your day-to-day communication. And so I don't have specific techniques, but I would say that being aware of the influence so that if you're walking in an environment that requires attention, if there's a lot of stuff going on, or if it's a little unstable, or you have your hands full, well then maybe you're going to cut back on the talking a little bit. And if you are doing a nightly walk with your spouse and you want to enjoy it, maybe you're not talking about the day's events or what you saw on the news, which we should all probably not talk about what we saw on the news. And that way you can enjoy that walk. So you're just modifying it. It's not rocket science, but sometimes it's good to remember to bring that to bear so you can say talking is not really the most important thing right now. Maybe walking is, maybe turning is, maybe getting over this ledge or this pair of steps or whatever you got to deal with. Another area, and then one that comes a little closer to my area of practice as a speech-language pathologist, is meal times. And if you think about a mealtime, you're trying to take in liquid, you're trying to take in food, you want to get sustenance, you want calories, you don't want to lose weight unless you're on a diet. And that uses a complex set of activities, and liquid has kind of a way of going wherever it wants. So if you find yourself, eyes watering and clearing your throat, you know that the liquid got into some place it shouldn't have gotten to. And at the same time, you're going to have communication. You're going to be talking about something. Maybe you're listening to a TV program or watching something. And again, you're using a lot of those same muscles. You're using your lips and your teeth and your tongue to talk while you're also using it to control the food. And I can just say that sometimes that's a real recipe for disaster. That doesn't mean all or nothing at all. It doesn't mean you guys are in monastic silence while you're eating in the morning. Of course, when I have coffee with my wife in the morning, we're kind of in monastic silence, and it's just kind of the way it is. And the reality is, though, that you may find that there are times when you're going to want to focus on the eating. You're going to turn off the background noise, you're going to turn off the radio, you're going to turn off the TV, and you're just going to focus on that, and then you can have your conversation when the more intensive parts of the meals are over. And I will say, and I wasn't planning to talk about it, but it just seems so apropos, you're here, we're at a nice big event here, you're catching up with people, we're all in person again, we're all getting to connect together once again, we're done with all this COVID nonsense, and the reality is, maybe here, they have a nice light snack, but I wouldn't want to do a full breakfast with a Denver omelet and all that kind of stuff. Maybe you do that some other time, and you're really here to communicate and just have a little snack and a little something like that. And if you're going to a big family event or an outdoor event, and you're thinking, hey, I'm looking forward to seeing those people, maybe don't go there famished and ready to eat a side of beef. Maybe get a little bit of meal in beforehand so that you can be sure that when you're there, you're able to just do the connection with your family and your friends that you're trying to do. Okay, I want to talk about another area here. Oh, I've lost this again here. There we go. There are many aspects of Parkinson's. There are a number of symptoms of Parkinson's that can actually influence your cognition. And a lot of it has to do with things that are going to focus on your alertness. So, sleepiness, and that could be sleepiness during the day, daytime fatigue. It could be a medication-related thing. It could be sleep at night. It could also be fatigue that happens, and fatigue is pretty common in Parkinson's. Or it could be things that distract you and things that are causing a problem that you have to attend to, and that could be pain, that could be a balance issue. That's a very common issue that in Parkinson's. It could be anxiety that's distracting you, and anything that distracts you means that you're taking some of your cognition, some of your capacity, and you're putting it somewhere else, and now you can't bring it back to the motor planning and the prosody and all that stuff I was talking about before. So these are factors that address or that affect your Parkinson's, and it's really important to address them. And the first thing you want to do is identify the sources. You want to figure out what are the triggers. If you had a bad night's sleep, does that make you a little bit sleepier, a little bit less stable on your feet? Okay, that's something to be considering when you're deciding whether you're going to be going out to a big event that afternoon, or maybe you need to take a little bit of time to get some rest. Physical exertion, and that's not always just an exercise class, although it can be. It can be a lot of stuff you're doing around the house, and you might pace yourself a little bit so that you're not feeling so exerted. Anything that's going to interfere with your emotional state, the ups and downs that is very common for all of us and can be amplified in Parkinson's, that's something to consider. It might be even worth taking up with your doctor just to see if there are any things you can do to address that. And then, the medications is another one, because people who have been taking the medications for a number of years may find that sometimes the medications are working, and then sometimes they're starting to wear off, and it's time to take the next one. Well, when the medications start wearing off a little bit, that's often a time when you're not going to be feeling as peppy cognitively as well, and that could have an influence on how you're going to be able to communicate and also do the other things like walking. I think alleviating factors, it's interesting, coffee, we all have our coffee here, or tea. Caffeine is a really great, easy to access tool for a little bit of alertness. There's even a little bit of research out of MGH that shows that maybe it actually improves motor performance, but really I'm talking about being more alert right now. Making sure your medications, that you're taking them at the right time and that they're giving you the benefit that they should, and if they're not, your doctor can help you tweak that. And then this is the thing that I see most often, I see it myself sometimes too, over-programming yourself in a day. So every one of us tries to do too many things in a day and they don't give any recovery or downtime, and it's your eyes are bigger than your stomach when it comes to stuff you want to do every day. So maybe you're trying to do many things around the house before you run out to the store, and then you're going to meet someone for dinner later on. Well, put a little window in there. Give you that window to also take longer time, which we know is going to happen, but also to recover so that you're not working yourself into a tizzy by the time you're getting out to hang out with your friends and do fun stuff. Now, I got a couple of these slides here actually from my wife, who's a physio, and it's really great insight because I think that, again, it's a very simple solution. It's not rocket science. If you're someone who has a balance issue, you're going to have to spend energy and cognitive load to keep yourself upright. And so if you want to think clearly, speak clearly, be able to attend, if there's something that you need to take in, or you want to have a better connection while you're talking with someone, maybe you want to sit down. Maybe you want to not be trying to manage this while you're also talking. And on the flip side, if you are someone who has issues where you fall asleep the second you hit the chair, and I know many people like that, maybe when it's mission critical, you want to be standing, you want to be active, you want to keep that movement going so that you don't end up losing the script while you're talking to somebody. It's a great way to get in trouble. So okay, I'll leave that alone, but I just want to say that there's a lot of components here where I think that if you just think about what the problem is, the solution is pretty straightforward. Parkinson's is very complex. There's a lot of moving parts, but every now and then sometimes it's good to just say, oh, you know what, I'm falling asleep while I'm sitting in this chair. Let me get up. Let me make sure that I'm standing so that I can taking in my wife telling me what we're going to do that day and I'm listening. Or if I'm having an issue where I'm feeling a little bit unstable while I'm walking around, well, maybe you need to sit down and you can take it in that way. Now, just to kind of keep the last parts of this together here, there are things that aren't related to Parkinson's that are very addressable, and I think you should really take note of that because I have very few things that I can recommend to anybody that are like a light switch. And vision changes, and I'm not talking about the vision changes associated with Parkinson's, some of the double vision, diplopia kind of stuff like that. That's real. Talk about it with your doctor. Find a solution. That's more complicated. But we're all getting older. Maybe we haven't been to the eye doctor recently. Maybe it's time to upgrade the scripts on our glasses. You think, oh, well, that's, I'm doing fine. I mean, my phone is doing okay as long as my arm gets longer and I can pull it out farther so I can see it better. I need like a selfie stick just so I can read it. I don't want to get too personal with it, but my father just had cataract surgery last week. I came in town a little early to help him with that. And he's already 3 days in, and he's like, I can't believe it. It's like I see. And then whatever this was for 15 years because I was letting it go for too long. Things like that are like a light switch, and it's an instant fix, and you don't have to be like, and take this 3 times a day and make sure you do 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week. It's go to the eye doctor, get your prescription upgraded. If they see something that they can address with a surgery like for cataracts, fantastic. That's even better. And then the other side of this is hearing changes. And again, I'm a speech language pathologist. We generally get trained alongside audiologists. So our first year of graduate school, we're in the same boat together. And I'll just say that those kind of hearing professionals have a lot of expertise that go well beyond just, helping you understand whether you got too much earwax in there, which I'm going to tell you all. We all have too much earwax in there. You should go to an ENT and get that cleaned out. But after that, hearing aids have come so far. They're much better than you can imagine. They're integrated with your smart TV and with your smartphone. And just a couple years ago, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, deregulated them so they're available over the counter now. So something that maybe you went 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and it's like, oh, that'll be, $7,000, please. There are a lot of options that are fantastic at a much lower cost. And again, bringing it back to my father, I insisted he go to an audiologist. I made sure that he went to see somebody that was licensed to do these kind of assessments, not someone who sells this, who their business model is I sell things and I make money, but I do the assessments. And I also sell things and make money. I'm not pretending we're not in America, but I'm just saying that getting an audiologist's opinion and a screening made a huge difference. And she did it, and she did a fantastic job. And I looked at his hearing gram, basically, and he qualified for the lower cost, under $1,000 over-the-counter hearing aids. And I think that's a really great thing. It's changed things. And again, I don't have a lot of light switch opportunities. You turn on the switch and everything's better. But if you can address your vision and you can address your hearing loss, it'll improve so many other aspects of communication. There are study after study showing that people who don't have good hearing, who don't have good vision, aren't as well connected, and that loss of social interaction actually has an influence on their cognition. So it's one of these things where I'm going to stop harping on it, except to say, easy enough to do, get a referral, get an assessment, and get it done. It's easy to do. And then I'll say the other side of this is, when you're out and about, choose your communication environments wisely. This is actually a perfect environment here where it's set up and it's wide enough, but there's still a fair amount of background noise. Now, the hotel has done a good job of putting some dampening in here, but if I'm going to a restaurant, someplace with a live band, and a lot of hard surfaces, and a low ceiling, that was a great place for me to go about 30 years ago. I'm not interested anymore. I'm not want to fight. I will be the loudest person if we're talking. I can talk over the band, but now they hate me and I can't hear anything. So it's not very good. So I would say, vote with your dollars, vote with your pocketbook, go to places that are catering to people who want to have a conversation. And if you get to a noisy environment and you don't like what you see, at least get to places in that environment that are a little more conducive to communication. So find a booth. If you have a booth with a nice tall back, that is a great way to put yourself into, what is it, the cone of silence or whatever from that TV show from many years ago. Like, you can get into that and all of a sudden all the sound gets drifted away, and you can also focus a little more easily because your own speech sound is being bounced back and forth. If that's not possible, if it doesn't have a booth, try to get to a corner, particularly a corner way out of the way of where the servers are coming in and out with the food, or people are going in and out of the bathroom, because it's not just auditory noise, it's also visual noise. If you're talking with somebody and someone's walking right by, maybe you think they're coming up to you to talk to you, so now you're like, okay, let me wrap this up real quick before, and then no, they're going here to give the guy next to you a cup of coffee. So find those quiet parts of the room and maybe face the wall. You can make your care partner look out to the crowd if they want to. They have to deal with the extra noise. And that's valuable, because I think it's hard to impress on these restaurants. I think there's a whole business model where you could go into restaurants and be like, hi, would you like to have more people come in here and enjoy their experience? Here's the sound dampening you should use. Here's the things you should do. I think that's a tough sell, but you can choose it for yourself by choosing the right restaurants, and then if you get in there, choosing the right places and let them know that, hey, I want to be able to communicate here. So again, I feel like I'm proselytizing a little too much here, but I do think it's important. I want to stop here at the end here with just a couple of takeaways, okay? So I want to give you a couple things that you can do right off the top that you should be using right now. The first thing is look for communication experiences every day. So if that means calling up a friend, or I guess we're all in the world of getting on a Zoom call with your friends or whatever, FaceTime, that's great. That also helps with your social interaction, and we know that social interaction is really important for quality of life. We're getting very much into the era of social prescription, and I think that's coming for all of us, and that's great. So make sure you have those communication opportunities. Go to social events. Some of the many events and the support groups put on by the Parkinson's Foundation of Western Pennsylvania, or some of the other opportunities you have, that's a great way to do it. Singing programs, whether that's an actual Parkinson's choir, or a choir with your church, or a choir in the community, that's another great way to do things. And then again, she mentioned how much I'm into tech. I am a nerd. I love all things speech recognition, and whether it's on your phone, or whether it's on a computer, or you have an Alexa or a Google Home, those are nice tools for making you use your voice. If you want to dictate a text, I won't do it here because then I'll send a text to my dad, but I can say like, hey, S word, because I have an Apple, so I would say Siri, and send a text to my dad, and it would go, okay, what do you want to say? And I would dictate that. And I think that's a very cool tool, because if I don't dictate it well, guess what? It's like, hey, Dad, I want to take the bloop and put a burp because I didn't say the words right. So you have to use your energy, and you have to use your speech. So those are good tools. I will say too, though, that you should be doing the voice strengthening exercises that your speech language pathologist has prescribed for you. You're probably not seeing them at the same time, but they have some carryover activities. And I'm looking around, and I'm not going to bust anybody. If you don't have a speech language pathologist who has given you exercises, now's the time. I think everybody with a diagnosis of Parkinson's should have a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, and a speech language pathologist, a rehab team that knows a thing or two about Parkinson's, and you should have a long-term relationship with them. We call it kind of a dental model. They'll come in, they'll do the treatment, they'll give you your exercises, so I'll stop harping about that. And then you go in and see them in 6 months or a year, and you see how things are doing, you make sure there's no trouble. And that should be what you do for as long as you're living with Parkinson's, because you'll be able to catch things before they're problems. You'll be able to address things that maybe, I've been having this trouble, I didn't think I could fix it. Nope, you can fix it. You work with a good PT, and all of a sudden getting out of the couch is no longer a problem. And it's one of these things where I think you should continue to have that relationship forever. There are also excellent voice and communication classes. I know that we did some with the Parkinson's Foundation of Western Pennsylvania a couple of years that are on their YouTube channel. I've got to bet that there are some speak out programs and some other things that are here. So those are other great activities. And they're Parkinson's specific and led by people that have expertise in Parkinson's. So I like that. I'm biased in that way. And then finally, finding some lifestyle choices that really focus on improving your cognition. I think the most important one is actually the last one. Finding ways to get your sleep quality to improve is one of the best things you can do to improve your quality of life. It will improve your mood, it will improve your alertness and your cognition, and it will generally improve everything you do throughout the day as a result. Diet is another area that I think people don't spend enough energy on, but making sure that you're getting enough calories in, and it's good quality calories. It's not candy. I do love candy, and I know we all love sugary sweets, and making sure you're focusing on the diet. The Mediterranean diet is probably the one that has the most evidence, but I gotta be blunt, there's no definitive diet, so just a healthy diet, I'll leave it there. And then making sure you have enough exercise. And exercise is one of these 5 minutes a day, or 5 times a week, 30 minutes a day. Boy, I wish it was 5 minutes a day. And you need to do that as a baseline. So 5 days a week, 30 minutes a day is the minimum. If you're younger, if you just got diagnosed, I'd be moving that up. I lived in Colorado for about 15 years. Everyone there was like, they were crazy. I don't know how they do it over there, but you know, those people I'd be pushing even harder. But make sure you're getting that exercise. And then if you think you're seeing a communication issue and or a cognitive issue, time to get a formal assessment. That snapshot will tell you everything. You could put a lot of things to bed. You know, like you shouldn't be worried about that. That's just age related. That's not something to be focused on. And if there's something that needs to be addressed, now you can address it. And then you come to it 2 years later, 3 years later, 5 years later. That lets you and your doctor know, you know, is anything changing? Is there things we should be addressing? So it's nice to get the snapshot early so that you have a metric that you can compare it to over time. And then this last part here is making sure that when something does crop up, that you're not going to let's see how this turns out. Let me see how it goes for 2 or 3 days, 4 days. If something happens acutely, meaning suddenly, that's not very Parkinsonistic. That might be Parkinson's is not going to make it better, but it may be something else. It could be an infection. It could be something else that happened. And so if you're seeing something like that, you want to try to address that more aggressively. That's definitely worth a MyChart email or a phone call. And I put together just a little chart to talk about the questions you might ask yourself before you contact the doctor so that you can keep track of it. So, you know, at the very top, it's pretty simple. I'm not rocket science again. What's the problem? What are you having trouble with? How often does it happen? How long does it last? Okay, that's the bare minimum. I think we all have that covered. We also, though, want to know when it started. You know, did this happen suddenly? Has it happened 2 days ago and it's not gone away, or it's coming at a certain time? Do the medications influence it? You know, a lot of things with Parkinson's, when you take the meds, you get some relief, and then when the meds start wearing off, the relief starts to dissipate, and maybe that's the case here. And then you want to determine what may be making it worse or making it better. And those are things that you can send to your healthcare provider so that you can really get to the root of it and hopefully address the problem and come to a solution. We got into a really interesting conversation last night about, is it Parkinson's or is it something else? And it gets really murky. You could make an argument that anything that's cropping up, well, that's Parkinson's, and it's like, okay, is that, or is that just Parkinson's makes it worse? And so this is a great metric that you can use to say, this is new, and it happened pretty quickly, and I want to talk to my doctor, and if it's something like an infection or something that's making you slow down, pretty addressable. I mean, not new pair of glasses addressable, but get some antibiotics in the system, and it's very addressable, but you have to be able to communicate that to the doctor so they can help with it. Okay, again, I just want to leave it there. I wanted to leave just a little bit of room in case anyone had any questions I can answer before we get started. Otherwise, we'll be ahead of the game. Anybody have anything communication related? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any thoughts on music?
Music.
Yeah, some music soothing and some agitates people. Is there any?
Okay. So I'm just going to repeat your question because I know this is getting. So do I have questions? Do I have any thoughts about music and whether it calms people or agitates them? So you found situations where some music has agitated people as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to be funny about it because.
Certain types of
Yeah, I would have a situation where I came up, actually I have a musical background, and I used to be a professional jazz musician, and so if someone played music that I didn't love, that would definitely agitate me, right? I'd be like, oh, Boney James, here we go. I'm sorry, if you like Boney James, he's a wonderful musician, but I wouldn't want to listen to it. There's also music that could be too ramping you up, and that can also agitate people. But I will say that the research on music for Parkinson's is really quite clear. Michael Thout did some really groundbreaking work with neurologic music therapy, and I think that what we find is that music stimulates parts of the brain that are also somewhat affected in Parkinson's, like the limbic system, the emotional system, and that some of the cueing in music actually goes below the area that's damaged, the basal ganglia, goes into an older part of the brain. And so I will say that if you're going to pick music, you got to find something that actually motivates and stimulates the person. It's got to be music they like. It can't be music they hate. And then if it's something more general, make sure it's not too loud and rambunctious. Maybe the noise is becoming a cacophony. Maybe that's why they're getting agitated. Okay, I just had this vision, me and at sometime in the future, and they're like, oh, we're playing your favorite jazz, and it's some terrible like AI created monstrosity, and then they're like, why is he getting so mad? And it's like, I will be able to tell you, I'm sure. So I think music's fabulous, and that's why I do like Parkinson's choirs, any kind of choir. I think that there's really great data on that, and of course we love music, so it's a great way to motivate. And again, I won't steal anyone else's thunder, but we incorporate quite a bit of music in our exercise classes because otherwise we're all just standing here making movements, and it's not as much fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Yes, ma'am.
To add to that question, for some reason, when we're in the car, it's quiet, very quiet. When the music goes on, I start talking.
That's so interesting.
I can't hear you. Why didn't you talk to me when the music was on? But I want to talk. Maybe something stimulating.
So again, I just want to make sure that we get it on tape because I know we're recording it. So you're in the car, it's quiet, and then the music comes on and you start talking. Yeah. Again, music's one of those things where we can't really understand the phenomenon of why it is, but when something hits you and it makes you want to dance or it makes you want to sing or you just want to, you can't explain it, and it's, it's one of the beautiful things we have on this world, and we don't understand why. But whatever that song is, you want to see if you can find more like it, because that definitely helps communicate. I remember working with an individual, not with Parkinson's, many years ago, before I really got into Parkinson's, and they had aphasia, which is like a real communication issue. And I'm not a great guitarist, but I learned how to play a bunch of ABBA songs because that's what worked. And she loved ABBA, and there we are, Dancing Queen. Yeah, you can tell. It's exactly like that. So I had a smile on my face because I wanted to make sure it worked. But it worked, and then she would talk every time, and it was amazing. I remember, I literally get goosebumps thinking about how awesome that was. So she'll find that if it works for you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
My husband and I have a double trouble problem because I am deaf or partially deaf, and he has Parkinson's and speech problems.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult for us to communicate. But you didn't mention something that is common to everybody, not just to people with Parkinson's, and that is people drop their
Yep.
Even though you have wonderful communication, every once in a while, I lost the last 2 or 3 words of what you were saying.
Oh, because I was dropping off too. That's a good note. Shame on me, and I will fix it. No. If I'm not a professional voice user, I don't know who he is. So yeah, dropping off at the end is not good. Again, I want to bring it back in here. So you talked about the double trouble problem. You have some hearing loss. Your husband has a quiet voice. As speech therapists of the world, hear me. We've had this conversation 50,000 times. It's like, no, you are talking quiet, or maybe your wife needs a hearing aid. Maybe you're both right. And I just want to say marriage counseling is not part of my licensure, my practice, but it's real. And so what I'll say for that is that there are some things, obviously you have hearing aids if you know you have a hearing loss, but your husband, in addition to the training for the improving the speech and making yourself louder, there are portable speakers that you can use that could actually make him louder. There's a device out of Purdue called Speech 5, which now has Medicare coverage, and you wear it like a little Bluetooth wearable, and every time he gets ready to talk, this little accelerometer knows he's going to talk, and it puts a bunch of noise in his ear, and it stimulates a reflex. So it's not like reminds you to be louder. It induces something called the lumbar effect. Your doctor taps you on the knee and the foot comes out. It's a reflex. You can't stop it. And that's another tool that you could use that would make him talk louder without maybe necessarily the cognitive load. And then as far as the dropping off at the end of sentences, people who do that should know better. And if they don't do it, you can at least get some training to improve that. Some of that is breath quality. Some of that is breath support. For me, it's probably excitability.
For me, when I hear a joke, I hear 2/3 of it and I miss the punchline.
That's really sad. She says, when I hear a joke, I hear 2/3 of it and I miss the punchline. And that just sounds like, it's a terrible situation to be in there. Yeah. I'm thinking of an old Chet Baker song, but let me leave it there. If he's having that issue, and again, you've worked with speech therapy, great. If that's not giving you everything you need, add a little bit of tech. That could be an external speaker, and those used to be expensive, and I would recommend a particular brand, but now I see them all the time on Amazon for like $40, and it's the size of a box of raisins. I'm looking at the clock here, guys. Maybe, yes? Oh, yes, ma'am. Okay, last one, and then I'll say that I'm happy to talk, as you can tell. You can find me anywhere. I'll come find you, and we'll talk, and I'll answer your question. Ma'am, what's your question back there?
John, one of the slides says DBS affects word finding.
Yes.
What's the findings show for word finding?
Okay, so DBS, deep brain stimulation, has a very mild negative effect on what we call verbal fluency. I want to be very cautious about that because it's very mild, and there doesn't seem to be any other areas of cognition that are affected, but it's one of these things I feel like because we can see it. You know that old joke about why you're looking for your keys over in here under this lamp, but you lost them over here? It's because we can see it. I feel like verbal fluency, because we can count the amount of words you're saying and we can hear the distortions, we can see it. And so they notice that. It's a very mild effect. I would not use that as a criterion for why I wouldn't do DBS. And if you've done DBS, I wouldn't be like, well, of course I'm having this problem because DBS. But it is something that's been noticed in research probably for a decade or more. So that's it. So it's very mild. I want to be careful about it, but it is there. Does that answer your question? Yeah. And actually, if you look on that slide, that citing from 2017, that's exactly the article I got from it if you want to see the source. Okay, very last one, and then I'm being a bad person.
My Parkinson's has anything to do with what I consider to be sort of attention. Last year I had serious foot surgery, and I ended up with a blood pressure thing, and I think it's the psoriatic. Have you heard that?
Orthostatic hypotension. Yes, and yes, that is very Parkinsonistic. It happens quite frequently. There are medications for it. That is doctor stuff. I have a master, so I'm going to, yeah, wait for the expert panel. Yeah. Okay. Again, he's going to Cleveland Clinic. He's going to talk about that. When we have Dr. Licklider and the other movement disorder specialist here, that's a doctor question. We actually did a presentation on it, talking about the consequences from speech and physio. But again, we got people with bigger brains and more firepower to answer that question. I will say, I wish there was a wearable that gave you real blood pressure blood pressure readings. It's coming, but it's been pretty wonky, so I wouldn't buy one yet. But Your experience is not unusual. Orthostatic hypotension is a real thing. Okay, very good. Thank you so much, folks. I really appreciate it.